if you want to close more deals, you need to start having more sales conversations. And there are a bunch of ways that you can do that, but one of the most effective and scalable ways is through cold email. But a lot of sales organizations aren't doing cold email the right way. The spray and pray approach doesn't really work anymore. So what I'm going to be doing in this talk is telling you how to actually craft a cold email that will excite your prospects to open it and respond to your message every time. But before I get into the tips, you're probably wondering, who am I and why am I qualified to be giving you advice? So a little bit about me in case you don't know who I am. I'm Heather Morgan, and I'm actually a former economist, but I'm still a data nerd. That hasn't changed. I write for publications like Inc. magazine, Forbes, Salesforce, and various others. I've also been on NBC, and in the past decade, I have written more than 10,000 cold emails, sending at least an email a day, as well as my company, as well as myself personally, have managed hundreds of email campaigns in the last few years. And my company has actually managed more than 550 sales and marketing organizations' outbound prospecting emails. And so what I'm going to actually be sharing with you are the exact same tips and advice that we would use with our B2B clients that have helped them get response rates 3 to 10 times higher. And likewise, I've also actually written email campaigns myself that have gotten a 68% positive response rate from the C-suite. So I think I'm pretty qualified to give you cold email advice. And if you're wondering what's with all the orange goats, I think goats are really cool. I like to tell people, don't be a sheep, be a goat, because goats are very resourceful and independent thinkers, and they're just cool, and I like the color orange. So that's why we have orange goats everywhere on the slides, in case you're wondering. So before we're even talking about what you should put in your emails or how to craft a great subject line, I like to ask people, why should anyone bother to take the time to open and respond to your sales email? Yeah, you might be really cool. You might have a really great product, but these people don't know you if you're reaching out to them cold, and they may have never heard of your company or your product or your service before. So you have to keep that in mind. On average, about 3 or 4 out of every 100 emails sent get responded to. No more than that. This is the industry standard average open rate. But I personally think that is really, really low. And so I think you could be doing a lot better than that. But let's talk about why it's so low. In general, I believe the industry standards are low because most sales emails, frankly, they suck. And they're not very thoughtful. They're not very targeted. They talk about boring features and jargon, and they're self-focused, and they don't think about the prospect. They spend too much time talking about themselves and how great they are, rather than thinking about how they can solve their prospects' problems or add value. So, what are the secrets to actually writing successful sales emails? I know we've talked a little bit about what not to do, but let's now talk about what you should do in order to actually get people to open and respond. So on average, our clients regularly see response rates between 10 and 40%, but it really does depend a little bit as far as your list quality, product market fit, things like that, where you fall. But it's not uncommon for one of our clients to get a 37% response rate, meaning that for every 100 emails they send, they get 37 people responding, either interested in having a sales conversation or maybe some questions that would lead to a sales conversation from the prospect. So how do we do this? Well, I have 5 tips that will help you explain how you can actually do this yourself, or if you're a sales leader, how you can teach your team to do this to make their sales prospecting emails more effective. And the first step is to really think about and understand your audience, because a CEO and a CTO and a VP sales are all very, very different people. And while that seems obvious, a lot of times people are sending very generic and vague emails that are pretty similar between those audiences, and that's just not enough. But at the same time, having a buyer persona or ideal customer profile that's like marketing Mary is also not enough. You need to be thinking about what are the titles that you want to target, what are the verticals they are in, what are the business problems that they have. And so when you're researching your audience, you need to be thinking about what keywords are going to excite these people, what kind of tone would be appropriate or the most effective to use with them, what they might be afraid of, who are influencers they respect and trust that you might be able to cite or refer to, as well as, what kind of content do they enjoy creating or sharing. You can see this on Twitter and on LinkedIn and various social media channels. And if you're targeting a very small audience that has very high value, you can maybe send one-off emails, and therefore you would want to do really deep research on each of your prospects. But for most people, they can actually develop these buyer personas by researching about a dozen or so people from the given audience they want to target and looking at their profiles on LinkedIn, Twitter, wherever else they may live online, and just taking note of all the things that I just mentioned. The second tip I have is to really think about what is in their inbox. So once you've done some research on these people and you have a better idea of what they care about, what their pains are, what you should talk about in their message, you should start thinking about what their inbox actually looks like and when they're most likely to check it and what would stick out to them. So a lot of the best subject lines actually do look like the most important emails that these people would need to open and respond to quickly. Of course, you don't want to trick or mislead them to the point that they feel like you were taking advantage of them when they open that email, because that can burn the relationship prematurely. But you need to get their attention, and you need to do that fast, because there's probably 100 other people trying to get their attention in their inbox in any given day, maybe more. So how do we actually do that? Here are 3 strategies that I have that are really effective for writing subject lines, and you can blend a little bit of each one together if you like. But at a high level, one of my favorite tactics is to be weird and or surprise them. And so this would really be attention grabbing. You obviously need this to be appropriate and relevant if you're reaching out to CFOs of very large old companies that are likely to probably be a little bit older and maybe a little bit less comfortable with unconventional things. Maybe you don't want to be too crazy. However, if you're reaching out to millennials, it's a little bit different story. And I don't think you should necessarily profile based on age, but it's important to think about what is the culture of that industry or that role on average. And it won't be exact because humans are going to be different. There's going to be some variance, but at the end of the day, you can think a little bit generally, and that'll help you out. Another strategy that works really well is what I like to call camouflage. So trying to look kind of like the subject line of a potential customer or someone else that they would have to respond to can be very effective as well. So if you see some of these subject lines like company's best account executive or something about like missed refunds, if that's relevant to what you're selling and your customer, that could be very, very effective. And those subject lines have been quite effective in the past. The other tactic that also is extremely effective, but is a little bit dangerous, and you have to be careful with it, is looking scary, looking like an urgent problem that needs to be solved. However, it's really important that you are considerate, because I always like to say, I could write an email that I guarantee that you'll open that probably says something like, your husband or wife is in the trunk of my car, and you're going to open it, but it's going to hurt the relationship from the gate. You're probably going to call the cops on me. You're going to want to come after me. So you don't want it to be so scary and obnoxious that they hate you or they get on the defensive. You need to think also how your subject line is going to relate to the body. Otherwise, it's not going to be appropriate. But anyways, moving on. So before we get to my next tip, I just want to say I actually have some more tips on subject lines that we can't get into on this talk right now. So if you just shoot me an email at tips@salesfolk.com, I will actually send you an email that has a link to some articles and content that will help you write better subject lines with more examples. So just send a quick email. You can just put your name in there, and I will respond with those tips. But anyways, let's go on to tip 3. And that tip is to make sure that you have laser-focused value in every message. And so what this means is every email you send should have a purpose, and ideally it should try to add some kind of value. If you're focusing on a problem or a pain point, maybe you can also kind of tie in a potential solution. You don't have to spell it all out in one email, but there should be some concept of value in every email, and it really should just have one main focus. Sometimes one value proposition might go well with another, like peanut butter and jelly, and that's okay. But really do resist the temptation to try to say and do too much in one cold email, because that will either confuse your prospects or it will bore them, and they'll ultimately get distracted or just not respond to you at all. So try to keep things short and simple, and it really helps me as well as our writers and our sales team when you're drafting your emails to try to write the focus above every email you write, and ideally write a bunch of ideas down before you even start writing, and then that will help you keep your messages short and simple. So let's look at a really quick email example from a customer. And so the focus or the benefit was screening more qualified job candidates more quickly through a competition. And the subject line says online competition for company job applicants. It says, hey, so-and-so, or hi, first name. I have an idea for an online competition that can help you quickly attract and spot the most qualified candidates from hundreds of job applications. The same concept helped client X, we took out their info for confidentiality, screen more than 320 job candidates and find their dream hire in only 10 days. When do you have 10 minutes to hear how this idea could work for company? So you see how simple yet compelling and clear this email is. It's fast and easy for people to read, especially on mobile. You have to think about that. And it's very easy and tempting for them to respond. My fourth tip kind of ties into what we were just talking about, but it's keep it simple. So you want to try to keep things to the short and to the point, but also try to use simple everyday language whenever you can. Even if you're the most technical company, even if you're VMware doing something with robots or whatever, you can still try to simplify the language you use to make it easy to understand to the audience you're reaching out to. So I like to try to think about how can I write this for my grandma, although my grandma is actually pretty technical, so maybe how you can write it for a 12-year-old. But whatever you do, just try to cut out buzzwords and jargon whenever you can. And a few ways that you can do that is just try to think of what kind of things would be relatable to your customers. It's okay to use a buzzword if it's one that is in their daily vocabulary that makes you sound like an insider to them, but that better come from your research on LinkedIn or Twitter. And don't assume that all your prospects are necessarily going to know some of the buzzwords that you see on one or two profiles. So you have to make sure that it's a widespread industry term that they would all know if you're going to use it. When in doubt, simple plain English works really well. We had a subject line that was eyeballs, that was selling something talking about user engagement and impressions. And we did mention some of that in the email, but humans at the end of the day are going to have an easier time understanding everyday language than jargon. And a lot of times it will evoke a more emotional response if you just use more simple language. So do that. And then likewise, instead of talking about how your product or service works and all the features that you offer, try to just offer a quick customer story or anecdote that highlights the value that your product or service offers. So think about where you've made a customer's life or business better, or where you've solved a really difficult problem for them. The more you can do that and use those stories to talk about your company, the better shape you're going to be. And then third, like I said, just really stay focused and make sure that you're thinking about that not just when you're writing, but after you write your emails, take a break. Grab tea, coffee, go on a walk, whatever you need to do. Come back with fresh eyes and edit your email thinking about your focus. And if anything is off topic or irrelevant or redundant, cut it out. The shorter your email is, the higher chance that you're going to get your prospects to respond. Okay, and then my last and final tip that is also very important is to make sure that you're persistent with your outreach. And so we've found, after doing quite a bit of research with more than 100,000 leads tested, that approximately 1/3 of responses will come from emails 5 through 8. So what that means is if you're just sending 4 emails, you're probably missing out on 1/3 of the possible conversations you could be having with your prospects. And if you're just sending like 1 or 2 emails, you're probably missing out on 50% or more. So it's really important that you send 8 emails. However, that doesn't mean that these emails should just say, hey, I'm following up. Hey, did you see my email? Bubbling this to the top of your inbox, blah, blah, blah. No, each email needs to add new information or new value to make it interesting for your prospects to respond, because otherwise they're much more likely to mark you as spam and get annoyed with you. On the other hand, if you're trying new messages and trying to add new information in every email, not only will that help prevent them from getting bored, but it will actually increase your odds of getting a response, because if they haven't already responded to one value proposition or idea, bringing up another one will actually probably increase your odds, and then you can start to see which messages are getting the best responses and from who, and then you can start to test more things and optimize your campaign from there. But as you can see at the bottom of the screen, this slide is actually great for social sharing. So if you enjoy this talk, please do share this slide on social media. You can take a screenshot, or I believe they're also going to share the slides after. But my Twitter handle and my Instagram handle is Heather Rayhan. Rayhan's my middle name, means the same thing as Heather. # Sales Development Summit. And you can also share it on LinkedIn too. I'm Heather R. Morgan on LinkedIn if you want to tag me. But I actually have a few examples I want to go over with you really quickly so that we can now put these 5 tips into practice so that you can actually see some of these tips in action. So these are some emails that I actually got at a different conference that I was speaking at that were really bad. In total, I got something like 28 different bad emails, but we're just going to go over a few right now for the sake of time. So what I'm going to do with these emails, I'm going to briefly show you them, and we'll look at them. That way you have a chance to actually think about what is wrong with these emails based on everything I just shared with you and react. And then after that brief pause, I will reveal what is actually wrong with them, and you can see if you got it right or not. It's kind of a fun game you can play. So this is the first one. I'm just going to give you a moment to read it because I'm actually getting over flu and my voice isn't great. So just take a second and we'll skim through it together silently, and then I'll reveal. Okay, so let's reveal, and you can always probably pause this if you need more time. But obviously, right away, it's so long, it barely fits in the screen. It also looks very much like mass marketing rather than a one-on-one email with the header at the top, the see you at the summit thing, and with the bullet points as well. Bullet points and numbered list actually look like mass marketing and will pretty much, from what we've seen with a bunch of testing with hundreds of thousands of leads, will lower your response rate. So don't have them in your email, just focus on one thing and save those different ideas for different emails in your 8-touch sequence. But also, it's pretty long, but there's no social proof in there, and it's very self-focused. It's all about them, and it's pretty feature-heavy. They're talking about, they're doing, I mean, I know what SaaS is, obviously, but they're just talking about features like automatically formulate and consolidate SaaS revenue metrics, like, what's the value here? What's the end benefit to me? So it's pretty boring and it's long, and there's also not really a great call to action. Let's look at the next one now. So again, I'll give you a brief moment to read it, and then we'll reveal the answers together in a second. I think I was supposed to take out the Dave thing, but that's okay. You don't see the company name. So let's see what's wrong. Obviously, it's kind of long. He could cut it down. He's talking about himself a lot and just different things that aren't that interesting. It's very feature heavy. It looks like some of these are actually cut a little bit short, but there's really not much value or benefits. And his call to action is actually quite aggressive. As far as that, we look forward to meeting as many of you as possible this week, like with an exclamation mark. It's just really kind of tacky, and it feels very desperate, but also lazy with the link. Like, it's the equivalent of being on an online dating site, and it's like, hey, I'm trying to date as many women as possible. Why don't you come have drinks with me late at night? Like, no, I don't want to do that. No, thank you. So you really have to be thoughtful and considerate, but even if you're reaching out to hundreds or thousands of prospects, you need to just keep in mind that they don't care and they don't want to hear about that. They just want to know that you care about their business and that you can add value to them. One more email. I think there's one more. It might be two more. So give you a quick minute to read it. This one's shorter, should be faster. So what's wrong with this one? The subject line, first of all, is pretty generic, and it just resembles a marketing email. I don't know why that's cut off. Make sure to not have it in the final slides, but also they're just talking way too much about themselves. I like that it's shorter than the other two, but there's really just not enough value or social proof there. The blue shirts thing is kind of like nice and human, but the CTA has no value or purpose, so the email itself is pretty weak. And it was really awkward when we saw the guys walking around the conference when I gave this example in a previous talk of what was wrong with this email. So it wasn't just me. A lot of people were like, oh my God, that was the guy that sent that crappy email to us. So you really need to think before you press send how you're going to add value and if your email is worth sending or not, because if it's not, a lot of people might be making fun of you. But anyways, that's it for now. If you want more tips on cold email, sales prospecting, buyer persona research, just even more examples of bad emails like that and what not to do, just send me a quick email to tips@salesfolk.com, the same email I mentioned as before, and I will send you some helpful tips and articles that I think you will find very helpful. And then if you need even more resources, what you can do is go check out our website. We have some great resources. And I created this special bit.ly to share a number of different resources with you, including our email mastery course, but not just that. There are also other free resources on our website, and if you do decide you want to do the email mastery course, first lesson and some other stuff is free, and if you want more, you have to upgrade, but check out the free stuff anyways. And if you have questions for me, you can reach out at hrm@salesfolk.com. Tweet at me at Heather Rayhan, Ruyhan, and also just add me on LinkedIn. So hope you have a great day and happy cold emailing. Cheers!